Hello, everybody, and welcome to PreveCeutical's channel, where we'll be talking about company updates, industry updates, answering people's questions. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to send them over and introducing members of the team. So who better to kick us off than Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Van Deventer. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. Thank you for having me on your show.
Perfect. So let's dive in and talk about yourself a little bit first. Let's paint a picture of your role and everything. But first, tell me, what got you interested in business in the first place? And tell me about some of your past accomplishments.
Well, I came from an entrepreneur family. My father built international businesses and domestic businesses. And I kind of, from a young age, ran around with him and really enjoyed business and entrepreneurship and developing things and building things and actually seeing how they developed. So I became an investment banker and an investment advisor. I believe that was in '98. And I have ever since been in the capital markets. I've been through quite a few things in my life, different things, but more importantly, how PreveCeutical came to be is that I was one of the original Aurora cannabis people. So Terry Booth and Steve Dobler came to me and they had a company that they wanted to, take public. They wanted to raise some money and they wanted to, be in the cannabis space. Mm-hmm. So I, arranged for them to go public. I spearheaded the funding, I spearheaded the transaction, and took them public and showed them down the route of where to go. That was back in 2013, 2014. As the years went by, a few years went by, I started realizing that all these doctors, and they can see the benefits in cannabis, but there was no real science behind it. It was all anecdotal evidence. Yeah. They also can't condone anyone smoking anything. It's just against their principles. So I met a really intriguing doctor out of Australia, the University of Queensland, that had a technology that we were able to deploy, and it was a nasal spray. That's what's in our product, we call it the Soul Gel. That's a liquid that when you spray your nasal cavity, the mucosa at the top of the brain, underneath the brain-blood barrier, and that's how we can absorb the cannabis into your bloodstream. And by having this technology, we can now actually regulate the dosing and what cannabinoids go in, and it's much more bioavailable. So I then decided to spend some money and develop the Soul Gel, and this was in 2016, 2017. And we incorporated PreveCeutical for preventive health and to try to prevent different diseases rather than treat them after the fact. So that's how PreveCeutical came to be, was moving the cannabis industry into a medical side.
Agreed. Yeah, it's interesting, with cannabis, for a long time, everyone was kind of like, oh yeah, it's good for you. But the hard studies weren't there, right? It was really hard to make that leap from, yeah, cannabis can be good for you to, hey, here's the recorded health benefits across multiple studies. The cannabis can do this, this, and this. So tell me about that journey a little bit more. How did you guys help flesh that out?
So as I said, we've taken the cannabis plant and we have actually extracted all the different cannabinoids. And depending on who you speak to, there's between 141 and 200 different cannabinoids. We all know the major ones like CBD, THC, and CBG, but there's all these microcannabinoids that are very, very minuscule within them. So once we did that, one of the biggest things about our Soul Gel, as I said, it's a liquid that's actually sprayed in your nasal cavity. Because of your temperature change, so it's thermally activated, it gels. And it'll sit in that nasal cavity for up to 7 days. And we can, with a nanobubble technology, slowly time release it over X amount of milligrams per day. So, but one of the things about cannabis, it's a very, very oily product. So how do you take something that's oil and mix it with water and make it water soluble? That was our first issue we had. We actually solved that and made it water soluble. Now that we've got it in there, we've been able to now change how much the dose, because of the technology of the time release. We can release 10 milligrams over a 24-hour period, or 5 milligrams, depending on what they are, and we can make it either CBD, CBG, THC. So now that we've got that delivery system and the cannabinoids, we're now working on taking certain cannabinoids we know that work for like epilepsy or a cancer or other different ailments, and then we can take those cannabinoids and we'll be doing clinical trials to test what the dosages would be.
Interesting. Okay, so from there, you mentioned clinical trials. Can you give the timeline of where the product currently sits and where do you think it'll be by the end of the year and so on?
So currently, right now, we're working with a few universities in Australia and scientists. We've actually mapped out some clinical trials for cancer. We've actually mapped out one for the influenza strain as well, which could potentially, and we're not making any representation here whatsoever, but the COVID as well, because it goes through a certain nasal a receptor, the ACE2 receptor. We're not making, it's very clear, we're not making any representation on the COVID side, but we have this influenza one. So the cannabis one for cancer will actually be a 4-year trial. But what's important about that, that's not just going to be an over-the-counter product. That's going to be a prescription-based doctor product, and that's where the big value comes in. We have the one for influenza that we can accelerate and do that as a over-the-counter product. So you have to show safety and efficacy. But with that, we cannot make any claims. You can't say we claim it does this, that. So those are like the over-the-counter ones. It's about a 5-month to 6-month program. And then from there, obviously, you have to make applications to the FDA, the TGA in Australia, or Health Canada. And that's probably a couple of months before they approve that. So we're anywhere between like a 7-8 month to up to 4 years, depending on which way we go, if it's over the counter or if it's a pharmaceutical RX version. So we're looking at doing multiple programs.
Yeah, you know, one of the most interesting things about cannabis is it's not incredibly dangerous versus a lot of the things that are already on the market in terms of medications for epilepsy, etc. Cannabis is significantly safer in a lot of ways. Not making any strong claims here, but there's not as much overdose potential. It's not so much as a double-edged sword like a lot of these other medications.
That's true. And, you know, the worst case scenario we've seen now, of course, anything could change in life, but the worst we've seen is with people that green out and they have too much cannabis. But our soldier has an actual thing we can use that can stop that. So as you know, we spray it into the nasal cavity and it's thermoreactive. So the heat of your body gels it. If you're starting to have a bad reaction or you feel like you've had too much, all you have to do is get a douche, flush your nose with cold water. It turns it into a liquid and flushes it out. Wow. So it's not like a pill. Once you've ingested it, you're on the ride. Yeah. You can remove it at any time you want by flushing yourself with cold water.
Wow, that's interesting. That's not something you get with a lot of medications. Almost anything, like you said, any other form of ingestion. Yeah, once it's in, and then it's buckle up. But for this, you actually have a way to decrease it and actually help mitigate the effect of it. That's interesting.
Exactly. So no more going to the second you flush it out. That's it. It's done. There's no more going into your system. It's actually, so it's not like the pill that you've taken is slowly getting more and more into your system, and you have no choice. This is like, okay, I've had enough. I don't want it. So as we said, there's very little risk of any overdose that we've ever seen. However, I know some people, if they take a certain strain, like a sativa or an indica, they get anxiety. You know, some people have had that. Yeah. So if that's happening, you can flush it out and remove that ailment.
Wow. All right. Well, Stephen, last thing I want to dive into here is I want you to tell me more about your role in the company now. Tell me what it looks like working for the company on the day-to-day as the CEO.
You know, a lot of time I spend on the phone talking to investors, pharmaceutical companies, and you know, with my team, we've got Dr. Ajit Shetty, who was with Johnson & Johnson for 36 years. He was the chairman of Janssen Pharmaceutical, which is wholly owned by Johnson & Johnson. So very, very well respected. We have Dr. Matt Jawatica, who's with Pfizer for 28 years, and he was responsible for creating Zola. So I, every day, have communications with my team as we decide where are we going to move with our product lines next, who are we going to approach about partnerships with, who are we going to do clinical trials. That's the one side. And then on the other side, I'm dealing with our scientists and our researchers about the results they get, and our lawyers on patents filing and how to protect these intellectual properties. And then besides that, as you know, a public company has a whole administration side that I have to manage that team as well.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It sounds like you're playing the maestro in a lot of these roles, kind of leading the company in the right direction, which is great. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. I think this is a great intro, and we can dive deeper into things on subsequent videos. And if anyone has any questions, don't be afraid to send them over to us. We'll be happy to answer anything you guys got. Stephen, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me.